Greetings and welcome to Sake Industry News, the twice-monthly email-based publication that keeps you informed and educated about recent news and tech topics from inside the sake industry in Japan. In each video, we present a topic or so from a past newsletter, and be sure to stick around for the end, where we provide you with a link for a discount when you subscribe to Sake Industry News. Today, we have a story from Sake Industry News number 23, that talks about how special strains of koji mold are used together with modern yeasts. Let's dive right in. Koji fit for modern yeasts. In sake circles of late, or at least the geeky sake circles, there have been references to a strain of koji mold known as N54G. What is it, and why is it so significant of late? First of all, just as a quick review, remember that koji is not a mold. I tend to be a stickler on this point myself, but koji is rice upon which koji mold has been propagated. The mold itself is called koji-kin or tane-koji. In truth, I'm probably a bit more harsh about this point than I need to be, perhaps because in the long run I think it will behoove people to use proper terminology. Next, remember that sake breweries, also shochu distillers, miso makers, and other industries that use koji mold, do not make their own koji mold. While it can be done, and one or two breweries actually do it on a very small scale, koji mold is purchased from one of 5 or 6 specialist mold producers in Japan. These companies are proper, competitive enterprises competing for business, and R&D is a part of what they do. The aforementioned N54G koji mold is a product from one of those tane-koji producers, known as Akita Konno from Akita Prefecture. However, at least some of the other tane-koji producers have produced a competitive product. Each of these producers has dozens of product for sake alone, and more for the other beverages and products that use koji mold. Those strains of mold will differ in many ways, one of which is in which enzymes are created as the mold grows onto and into the rice, and in what amount. Other differences might include koji mold that creates less of the chemicals that make sake taste old or odd. Different enzymes will lead to different sugars, some of which ferment and others that do not, and some of which taste sweet, while others do not taste sweet. Sake yeast prefers glucose over other types of sugar, such as sucrose, fructose, and dextrose. Brewers can select the mold they think is best for their style of brewing, or for each individual product, or even stages of production within the same product. The tane-koji product here is special because it yields a lot of glucose, or rather, it makes it easier to yield a lot of glucose. In truth, there are many ways to do that. Use more koji mold, grow the mold in such a way that the necessary enzymes are plentiful, tweak temperatures, tweak timing. All of those will work in creating more glucose. But all of these have the potential for unwanted side effects too. But using a specialized mold makes it easier to achieve higher levels of glucose while minimizing the impact on everything else. But what is really interesting here is why this mold is more commonly used today than, say for example, 20 years ago. And the short answer to that is modern, uber-fruity yeasts. Today's modern ginjo and daiginjo aromatics can be very intense, and they're very often laden with aromas like apple, anise, and tropical fruit. These arise when the yeast creates a compound known as ethyl caproate. But whenever ethyl caproate is created, so is its cousin, caproatic acid. And this acid leads to bitterness in sake. So what this means to normal folks is, if you have apples and the tropical aromas in your sake, you will almost always have a bitterness in the background of the finish as well. Not always, never say always in the sake world, but often. So what brewers do is they jack up the sweetness by creating more glucose, but they do it at the end of the fermentation period when the yeast no longer has the power or the time to ferment it into alcohol. So it remains as sugar, as sweetness, and it does a very effective job of masking that bitterness. This is, of course, a borderline gross oversimplification, but it will do in a pinch. So the main point of interest here is that because many breweries these days use yeasts that will lead to very fruity aromas, the use of high glucose koji to counter the inevitable bitterness that comes along with those aromas has increased as well. These types of koji mold, like N54G, did not exist years ago because the yeasts that made them necessary did not exist in the sake industry either. Bold apple, tropical, anise-laced aromas were not a part of sake until about 20 years ago. And although I say that tonic koji like this one are in the geeky news these days, remember that there are brewers that do not use those yeasts at all. And also remember that there are other ways to get glucose to mask that bitterness should a brewer want to do so. More koji at the end of the fermentation, even the use of straight enzymes properly timed will also do the trick. But using tonic koji like this is an easy method that minimizes the footprint of the effort and maximizes the desired effect. Lastly, rarely do sake breweries put the choice of koji mold on the label or make that information publicly available. No one hides it, it's just more a matter of not wanting to bog consumers down with too much useless information. While the choice of koji mold can be important, the skill and technique used in propagating the mold onto the rice is of much more importance, or at least that's what most brewers will tell you. For those that are interested, two of the more well-known tonic koji producers have English language websites. Akita Kono and Higuchi Moyashi both have websites, and the URLs for those websites are listed in the email version of Sake Industry News number 23. You can learn more about the magical molds there. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to subscribe to Sake Industry News. And twice a month, you'll receive fresh news from the sake industry in Japan, and one technical, historical, or cultural anecdote as well. Go to the URL shown here to subscribe. Only $100 a year for 2 issues a month, or $10 a month if you prefer to go that route. And both options give you access to all back issues. Still not sure? You got nothing to lose because your first 2 issues are free, and you can cancel after them with no charge whatsoever. Also, you can use the link shown here and in the notes below for a 20% discount for your entire first year. Sake Industry News. Know more, appreciate more.